The Legend of Blackbird Hill. The Blackbird Hill legend is a heart-wrenching story of lost love. It starts out with a young couple who were deeply in love. The young man was to travel abroad for a short period of time before returning to marry his young lady. However, he was shipwrecked during his journey and took nearly 5 years to find his way back home to America. By that time, the young lady had given up on him, thinking he was dead, and married a Nebraska pioneer. The couple set up their home on Blackbird Hill, the burial place of honored Omaha chief Blackbird. One day, a man walked up the path toward their home. The woman went outside to greet the visitor and was shocked to see it was her former love. The man was dumbfounded. He had been heading west for California when he noticed the interesting hill and wanted to get a closer look. The two confessed their undying love for one another and vowed to be together again. The wife planned to explain her situation to her now husband that evening and ask him to release her from the marriage. Her love hid outside and waited for her to join him on his journey. The husband, upon learning of his wife's affection for another man, flew into a jealous rage and attacked his wife with a knife. As she lay on the floor bloody and screaming, her husband picked her up and carried her to the cliff at the top of Blackbird Hill. He leaped off the cliff into the river below, killing them both. The young lover could not reach the couple in time to stop the tragedy. A final anguished scream rose from the river as the woman perished. And legend has it that on October 17th of every year, the anniversary of the murder-suicide, the woman's terrified screams can still be heard across the hill. Farmers versus bunnies. Though most Nebraska folktales come from pioneer times, this one is fairly recent, from the 20th century. This story goes that two very bored farmers in their late 60s decided to take a little trip to Missouri to buy a type of firework that Nebraska has outlawed. They came back from their trip with a large quantity of M1000s, an extremely powerful firework, almost as strong as a stick of dynamite, and a bottle of peppermint schnapps to share. Rabbits had been particularly frustrating on their farm that year, so the pair taped a number of them to have some gruesome fun. While drinking heavily, the men would take a single M1000 and a roll of duct tape, attach the explosive to a rabbit's back, light the fuse, and then let the animal go. The bunnies would run off into the distance, and the farmers would laugh with delight when they were blown to bits. But one bunny got its final revenge, however. Instead of running for the hills after its fuse was lit, it ran straight to the pride and joy of one of the farmers, a brand new pickup truck. The terrified animal cowered under the truck until the fuse ran out, taking the bunny's life but also destroying the farmer's cherished new vehicle in a spectacular fireball. The Hatchet House. The town of Portal was once home to a quaint one-room schoolhouse on the side of a rather rickety wooden bridge. Known originally as Portal School, it would soon come to be called Hatchet House. Legend has it that the school teacher went crazy one day, decapitating all of the students inside and placing their heads on their desk. She then took all of their hearts to the bridge and threw them one by one into the water. Locals call it Heartbeat Bridge because as you travel across it, the shuddering boards sound exactly like the beating hearts lurking in the water below. The Portal School is a real building, which because of frequent flooding was relocated to a town nearby and serves as a fun field trip destination. Those who still believe in the legend venture to the schoolhouse on dark nights to see if they can feel a presence of the mad school teacher and her ill-fated charges. The Salt Witch. A pillar of snowy salt once stood on the Nebraska plain, about 40 miles above the point where the saline flows into the Platte. And white men used to hear of it as the Salt Witch. An Indian tribe was for a long time quartered at the junction of the rivers. Its chief, a man of blood and muscle in whom his people gloried, but so fierce, withal, that nobody made a companion of him except his wife, who alone could check his tigress rages. In sooth, he loved her so well that on her death, he became a recluse and shut himself within his lodge, refusing to see anybody. This mood endured with him so long that mutters were heard in the tribe, and there was talk of choosing another chief. Some of this talk he must have heard, because one morning he emerged in war dress, and without another word to anyone, strode across the plain to westward. On returning a full month later, he was more communicative and had something unusual to relate. He also proved his prowess by brandishing a belt of flesh scalps before the eyes of his warriors, and he had also brought a lump of salt. He told them that after traveling far over the prairie, he had thrown himself on the earth to sleep, when he was aroused by a wailing sound close by. In the light of a new moon, he saw a hideous old woman brandishing a tomahawk over the head of a younger one, who was kneeling, begging for mercy and trying to shake off the grip from her throat. The sight of the woman 40 miles from the village so surprised the chief that he ran towards them. The younger woman made a desperate effort to free herself, but in vain, as it seemed, for the hag wound her left hand in her hair, while the other she raised the axe and was about to strike. At that moment, the chief gained a view of the face of the younger woman. It was his dead wife. With a snarl of wrath, he leapt upon the hag and buried his own hatchet in her brain. But before he can catch his wife in his arms, the earth had opened and both women disappeared. But a pillar of salt stood there where he had seen this thing. For years, the Indians maintained that the column was under the custody of the Salt Witch. And when they went there to gather salt, they would beat the ground with clubs, believing that each blow fell upon her person and kept her from working other evil. Rawhide Creek. A very common legend is that of Rawhide Creek's name. The creek, a small tributary of the Elkhorn River in Douglas County, was the setting for a story of senseless violence and retribution. As some settlers were known to do in the frontier days, a young white man murdered an unsuspecting Native American girl simply because he had vowed to kill as many Native Americans as possible. The girl's family soon tracked down the murderer and confronted him along with the rest of his party. The tribe gave the men a choice: either give up the murderer or they would all be killed. The group quickly handed over the young man to meet his fate. As revenge for the senseless murder, the Native Americans beat and tortured that young man, finally skinning him on the banks of the creek. The creek was thereafter named Rawhide Creek. for those grisly acts committed upon it. Radioactive Hornets. We've all heard about killer bees before, but what about mutant super bees? Luckily for Nebraska, there's an urban legend insisting that radioactive mutant hornets have been frequenting the area. More recently, this legend refers back to the Fukushima disaster, claiming that the hornets have come from there and are now killing people. It's worth noting, though, that Nebraska has several nuclear reactors of its own, and even houses one of the first ones that were ever made in the United States. Because of the nuclear components, and often sealed inside of reactors after decommissioning, legend has it that sometimes animals and plants can still be affected by the reactors. So these silly mutant bees have been buzzing around for some time, though no actual deaths or injuries are on record due to giant hornets. This is still just a fun legend to tell. I hope you ghouls enjoyed those Nebraska urban legends. Some of them were really good. I really like the ones that are plausible and probably are. Honestly, I did not look up the legitimacy of some of them, but like the ones with the Native American, like Rawhide, that seems very plausible. And for all I know, I mean, it probably did happen. I don't know. I'll have to actually research it. I'm just too lazy. But they were short, so I did add an extra bonus LOL one with the mutant hornets or whatever. What are you guys going to be for Halloween? By the way, before I forget and never ask, because it's like less than a week away. Well, it's not less than a week away. It's less than 2 weeks away. And I want to know what you're going to be for Halloween. I'm probably just going to be Negan. But let me know what you ghouls are going to be. I'm honestly very interested. And do you buy your costumes? Do you make your costumes? Do you do half and half? Do you make some and then, buy the rest? Let me know in the comments. But as always, ghouls, the last video will be on the top left. The next video will be on the bottom left. All my social medias are on the screen, as well as in the description box below. And remember, there's always someone or something watching you.